Perfect. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third webinar of the Singers Laboratory webinar series. Today, I'm going to discuss tools to tackle unfamiliar new songs. Just to give you a little bit of the order of the presentation, so you know what to expect in the next 45 minutes. We're going to start by talking a little bit about different ways of learning a new song and talk a little bit about positive and negative aspects of those. I'm also going to talk a little bit about different learning styles and then offer a step-by-step kind of a formula for you so you can follow and learn any new song that comes your way. We will end the presentation with some resources and also a question period. So first, let's think about how you normally start learning a completely new song, something that's unfamiliar, it's very new. What is the very first thing you do normally? So let's reflect on that a little bit. You can write it in the chat or unmute and let me know. And I've written quite a list here because I know everybody has their own method. So let's reflect a little bit. Do you usually start with just maybe YouTubing the song and seeing if there are any recordings? Do you start with just reading the text? Do you like learning a little bit about the composer, the poet, that contextual information before? Or do you just like to sing right away? Especially in choir environments, a lot of times you might just start singing right away if you don't know a song, or sing with a group of people and try to kind of figure it out together. Or if you take voice lessons, the first time you look at a piece of music might be the first time that you go through it with a pianist or an instructor. Some people also like to kind of separate different elements, work on technique separately from emotion, or just start by thinking about what the song might be about. What's the message? What do you want to portray? I see that there's a few messages. I would listen and try to sing along to a lyric video. Oh, that's a good idea. Listen to it first. Find out background information. Recording. Read lyrics, find recordings, and then learn about composer. Those are very great ones. What if you come across a song that is largely unknown? There aren't recordings of it available. What would you do when that part of it is missing? It's a little bit harder, isn't it? So each one of these elements that you mentioned, each new first step comes with own pros and cons, right? So there are specific things that might be working very well depending on what you start with. So if you like working on lyrics, you are probably going to have a good understanding of the poetry throughout your work. If you like listening to recordings, maybe you will have an easier time memorizing the song and remembering the song, right? If you're one of those individuals that kind of deconstructs everything, think about technique, then emotion, then story, maybe you'll feel confident by the time performance comes, you know? So these are all good things. You might connect to the music more emotionally, again, if you work on text and music together. And also you might know the characters better in a way. However, they also come with elements that are potentially missing from our practice method and practice journey. So I listed a few things that I have heard quite commonly, and it has also happened to me. See if you relate to any of these. Sometimes we spend a lot of time on a piece of music, but after a few months, we realize that we took too long to learn it, and it's still not feeling comfortable. It's still not performance ready. So in a way, we might feel stuck. We might also find that there are things that we need to unlearn, bad habits we need to unlearn, and then relearn things. That's a very common one. We might find moments when we're struggling technically, musically, even for memorization. We might have done our work, spent a lot of time, and actually have been committed to the learning process, but it's still not sounding the way we want it to sound, like probably technically. So these are just a few things that might be missing from different practice methods. There is cures for all of those actually. So I'm basically going to introduce you to, I'm always fascinated by an idea of creating an effective, efficient practice method. And I've thought about it for a long time. And if I were to present this maybe a year from now, 2 years from now, this might be a different presentation. So take whatever is helpful to you away from this presentation, but feel free to explore and modify. And of course, stay true to yourself. Somebody says if I listen to the original too much, it can be harder to make the song my own. Yes, absolutely. Because you're being conditioned by another performer's ideas and interpretation and things like that. That's a very good point. So a lot of times I actually stay away from recordings so that I could make sense of it first, and I can put something of my own into the performance. So what is the purpose of having a good practice method? So the purpose is that we want to elevate all those positive aspects that we discussed and minimize the negative aspects in the previous slide. We want to be able to beautifully marry technique and emotion. We want to be able to bring text and music and theatrics together in a cohesive performance and feel confident at the end of the day. And when all of those things come together beautifully, you will start enjoying your own learning process and your own music making. And also, you will start learning songs in a timely manner, more songs in a shorter time. Especially if you're one of those individuals who enjoys being part of many different choirs, ensembles, or just very active in the performance world, there is a lot of deadlines, right? And a lot of rehearsals, and things need to be performance ready. So a really good practice method will be able to help you with all of those things. So remember that everybody has their own unique style of learning. And I've listed 4 here. There's a lot of online information about these things, and you can study about them. Most of us have more than one of these learning styles together. So some people are visual and learn better just looking at things with visual elements. Some are auditory, they like to listen to things. Some benefit most when they're reading and writing things, and that process of repeating that. And also kinesthetic. That one might be the one that we're most unfamiliar with. A lot of times maybe that's just not acknowledged in the school systems, but in the kinesthetic method, individuals enjoy having movement added so that they could connect movement with any concept they're learning. And then as a result of connecting different movements and remembering the sequence, then they can remember a song or remember a particular concept. I always say this to all my students and choristers, but I thought it's important to emphasize it here again, that just singing through songs doesn't make us improve as singers, right? And we need to really be patient and put a lot of care into working on individual aspects. As a result of that, the process will be slow and long at first specifically, but that is the most effective way if you want to learn in a really wholesome way. Now, the first thing that I would recommend is to try to dissect the different elements that you normally bring together in rehearsals and think of them separately before combining them. I've listed a few things here. So start with the score. Just look at the music sheet, see what kinds of information the composer or the editor provides you. Look at the text separately, the poetry. Practice technical exercises, the technique aspect, vocal technique separately. Think about the storytelling, and finally bring all of those together in terms of stage presence and performance. So let's look at this piece of music on the page. Look at the score and tell me, maybe write in the chat, what kinds of information this piece of music is giving you. So look at the written words, look at symbols that you're seeing, look at the vocal part, but also the piano part. What are you getting from this piece of music? Just looking at the score. And I'm not looking for complex answers, just very basic things. What are some of the information that the composer or editor are trying to communicate to you as a performer in how to perform this? Or what is this piece of music? Any answers? Can you maybe detect, oh, let me see the chat. Yes, perfect. Andante, 3/4 time, perfect. So indications of tempo and time. The slowly, quietly, there's elements of those. There's a diminuendo at the end, there's crescendos everywhere, there's a mezzo piano at the beginning. Can you detect the creators of the piece? The composer and the poet. And you also see the title on top and then opus number and number of the song within that opus. There's also other things like accent marks. There is maybe a few notes at the bottom of the page that we could read when it was copyrighted. The piano is a bit different than the vocal part. The piano has these tenutos, it flows differently. There's pedal markings. The language is in English. So there is a lot of information actually. Yes, Coleridge-Taylor. So this is Coleridge-Taylor, not Taylor Coleridge. That's something that you might be thinking, not the poet, but the composer, Samuel Coleridge-Taylor. And he was named after the poet, actually. So you see that there is a lot of information to digest just by looking at the score. So in the next slide, I've included all of those things that we talked about. Figure out just the basic information: title, composer, poet, language, key and time signatures. If you want to go a little bit more in depth, you can even mark modulations, if there's key changes, accidentals, any indication of time and dynamic and articulation, but also any indication, normally Italian or German terminology, that would help you kind of decide how to sing. Should you be singing softly? Should you be singing in a joking manner? Should it be graceful? All of this extra terminology that could also aid you. And extra notes. What I normally recommend is to color code all of these different things. So I personally always highlight piano with blue. I always highlight forte with pink. So then over time, I come to kind of associate colors with a specific concept instead of just circling everything. Sometimes circling everything could allow things to get lost, right? So color coding is a really good method. Now, after you've had a chance to just look at the score on this higher level, very generic, you can then start a little bit more in detail, look at the structure of the song. Is it a strophic or is it through composed? Are there any changes in the voice or vocal in the vocal or piano part? Just mark anything that seems different or interesting to you so that when you come to it during your learning process, you're not missing it. So strophic means that it is repeating. So maybe it's one page of music actually, but it's repeating on different texts. The music repeats, the lyrics change. So I normally always start with text. Now you might find musicians that like to start with the music. There is no right or wrong answer, right? But I really like to focus on text and look at it completely on its own as a different unit. I read through the poetry, I research the poet, and I try to figure out if that poem is part of a larger work. So you see how much kind of research and contextual information goes into this. By a simple search, especially if it's popular poetry, you would be able to find analysis of it. What do other singers think of this song? What are some symbolism elements in it? What is this song about? And most often, we need to really dig deep and think deeply to get to the gem, to get to maybe what the poet really, really meant. We don't want to have this kind of surface level interpretations. After we've done all that work, we can begin to think about what, who, why, and where within our story. So we can kind of start to construct our story. I really like the idea of marking every phrase with one very specific emotion and try to be specific and creative about it. So happy and sad are not enough emotions. Try to get a whole range of things so that when you look at your score based on the emotions you've written, you can trace the emotional journey of the character. You can really see where they were at the beginning and where they end at the end of the song. All of these things will really help you create your story. And I recommend that you be very creative about it and very specific. So it's not enough to say a heartbroken person. I want more details about that. Why is that person heartbroken? What is the reason they feel like they need to express it? Why are they singing about it? Where are they? What is the contextual information? What do you think happened that they're now heartbroken? A lot of times you might not get the answer to all of those questions within one poem, but that is okay. You can just kind of make it up. Sorry, I think, let me see, I see a line on my PowerPoint. I'm gonna just see if I can turn off. Perfect, there you go. I turned off annotation. So after you've had a chance to think about the text, in a different practice setting, you can try to start thinking about the music. So research the composer's works, not just the song that you're singing, but a little bit larger compositional history so that you can learn about their compositional style maybe. Listen to the recording of the song, maybe different recordings of the song, or just different recordings that is by that composer's compositions. That would really allow you to enter the world of that composer. What was their style? What is their signature? So it'll give you more understanding from a musical perspective. After that, as you continue your music work, start marking the lines. So where are the phrases? Sometimes in some editions that you get, there might be no phrase markings. And it might be hard to know, well, where do I breathe exactly? In a choir environment, you might be told where to breathe. But in a solo environment, you need to kind of deal with all of that, right? So draw phrase marks. Where does a phrase start and end? As a result, you know where to breathe. Go line by line, really kind of resist the urge of singing through the song so many times to develop bad habits. Go one line at a time, just to start by singing on vowels, then add the consonants or the words. Again, you see how I'm trying to deconstruct even the simplest exercises. So don't just sing through a line, sing just on a vowel. Maybe hum the melody first. As you repeat that more and more, every time add one more element. So maybe you want to add a dynamic to it that you see on the page. Maybe you want to add an articulation marking, like an accent. And then throughout this work, every time you can work on a different technical element. So you can sing through a few lines and say, you know what, I just want to focus on posture right now, or on support, or on the position of my jaw. There's so many things to work on that it would really serve you well if you try to focus on one thing at a time before combining them. Here I've created a short list of elements you can work on. This list continues forever. You can work on breath marks, support, onsets, which is the moment that you start phonating at the beginning of a phrase, dynamics, articulation, movement of phrases, rubato, posture, vowels, consonants, legato versus staccato. This is just a very short list. It could go on, right? So you see that depending on what song you're working on and what it requires, then maybe you can handpick a few of these elements over others. So you've worked on the text and you've worked on the music separately. Now it's time to put them together and see what's the relationship. Can you do a text music analysis? So you look at the text and music together and see how they interact with each other. Are they elevating each other? Are they sometimes maybe in contrast to each other? They're fighting, they don't go together. Maybe you're singing about a happy day, but the piano is all rough and loud and staccato. What does that mean? That doesn't really sound like a happy day. What's that extra element in it? Is the piano commenting on the voice, or is it just an accompaniment? You can mark word painting. Simple word painting elements like when you sing about the sky, the phrase is rising upwards. You're going higher and higher. So basically, you're trying to figure out the relationship between text and music, but also between voice and piano part. Always remember to look at the piano part as well and to see what kind of mood is being set. I really like the idea that when you look at text and when you look at text with music, that text could take on completely new meanings. I wrote my thesis on this, that how text on its own in vacuum could mean something, and then as soon as you add this music element to the hybrid, all of a sudden text starts taking on new elements. So then finally, you work on all of these elements and it's time to think about performance. Practice, practice, practice. Practice the performance element. Perform in front of as many people as you can before you actually get to the final concert. Think about what's the point of your performance. Think about that so what element. What do you want to convey? At this stage, you could also start thinking about memorization tactics. There is many different kinds of memorization tactics. Some things that might help you is to go back to your learning style. If you think you're a visual person, you might kind of be able to write the lyrics on little pieces of paper and then put them all over the wall in one continuous line so that you see the story in one continuous line rather than imagining page by page with kind of disconnection between pages. If you're auditory, you can read the text or sing the song and record yourself, then listen to that recording. If you like reading and writing, write down the lyrics over and over again. If you're a kinesthetic person, you can associate movement to every phrase and try to remember the sequence of movements, and as a result, the sequence of those phrases. I also included visualization here. In my last webinar, I spoke in detail about what visualization is and how it could help performing artists, just like athletes. You can go back to my YouTube page for that, but I can also send you the resources after this webinar, so you know what visualization is and how to use it. If you're interested to learn more about it or to chat with me, you're also free to email me. So now we're putting everything together, right? We had the background information about the composer and poet. We thought about text and storytelling. We worked on music and vocal technique. We thought about text music together, and we've also done some stage work. You see how there's so many different elements before we actually get to stage. This process, as I mentioned, is long and slow. But what you need to bring to this is a lot of patience for yourself and for your work and for everybody that you work with. Over time, you will see much more good results with this method. You will just get better and faster at learning songs. Some final thoughts: be true to yourself, be explorative, and this is not written in stone, of course. Modify things, explore with different elements, learn about yourself. If you find anything cool, email me and let me know. I'm always looking for new fun things. After this presentation, you will get an email from me with different resources that you could engage with, online resources, books, talks, things like that. And I also wanted to mention that all attendees of the webinars are eligible for a 30-minute lesson with me at a pay what you can rate. So if you'd like to set that up as well, you can email me and I'll put my email in the chat as well. And now, questions. So let me just put my email in the chat while you're thinking about any questions, concerns, comments. If you'd like, you can raise your hand, unmute, or type it in the chat. Oh, that's a great question, Eva. Any suggestion for choirs where members are learning in different ways at different speeds? So any kind of group learning, right? It's a bit difficult because everybody learns in such a different way and at such different speeds. So as a conductor or a leader of the group, this goes into the music education territory and teaching artist territory. That conductor needs to be aware that the material needs to be accessible and equitable. And that means that they need to provide guidance in a variety of different ways. It should be visual, auditory, kinesthetic. There should be a variety of different things so that everybody in the choir could take something away from it. And there is nobody who's excluded. In terms of the pace, that's a very difficult thing, to kind of set, especially with deadlines and concerts. It's important again for the conductor to know what is the level of just musical capability and background. And normally we set the pace to the people who have the least musical background so that we kind of include them. We still bring them along. They don't feel lost. As a result of that, sometimes rehearsal processes could seem too slow for some others, right? Or too fast for some others. So it's really kind of a negotiating process, right? And it's very important to also be transparent with everybody in the chorus there, in the choir, that we're trying to pick a pace that works for everybody. We're open to suggestions. We're willing to modify things as we go along. If you need extra help, reach out, but we want all of you to be included. And we want everybody to have fun and everybody to learn. So it's a little bit of an also learning process as you go along. Nick is asking, how do you know when a piece might be beyond your current capabilities? Oh, that's a very good idea. So I have a webinar planned specifically to answer this question because it's a common question. In winter, I have a webinar about how to pick the best music for yourself or your ensemble. So I'll go through another 40 minutes of webinars just for this. But basically, you need to look at a music, usually with the help of an instructor, a pianist, or a conductor, to be able to pinpoint musical elements that might be too difficult for your level, right? Textural elements that might be too difficult if it's a language you've never sung in. Harmonically, just the compositional style might be something you're not familiar with, right? So there is a lot of different elements that you could speak with an instructor about so that they know where you stand. You want to pick songs that are just a little challenging, right? So you could learn, but if it's too challenging, then it's no longer fun, right? So you want to really find that good balance. Very good question though. I hope I answered that. If I didn't answer any of your questions, let me know, I'll elaborate. Any other questions? I see Robert's unmuted. Do you have a question?
Yeah, what I was thinking about, well, most of what you said was, I thought, really good, and all my questions you answered at one point. But warm-ups, you were talking about technical elements in the song, and then presumably if you were doing a warm-ups, you would want to work on similar technical elements, derive your warm-ups to a certain extent from the technical elements in the song.
Yes, that's very true. So it's always, especially for choir rehearsals, it's always best to tailor warm-ups for every rehearsal to the song that you're going to work on, actually. So they're somehow connected. They're going to help you, right?
Yes.
And warm-ups are not just technical exercise. They seem a little bit in vacuum because they just sometimes seem like technical exercises, runs, leaps, things like that. And we emphasize a lot, emphasize technique a lot in warm-ups. But also we could emphasize emotion in warm-ups. Warm-ups don't often have words. But what if you imagine a story for the warm-up and you imagine emotions? How would that emotion then inform your phrasing and musicality? When we sing warm-ups, we don't want to sing the whole thing forte the whole way through. How can we get nuances within our warm-ups? Could we start piano and then grow? And that in itself is another technical exercise, right? So for any warm-up, I would say it's great if you can kind of brainstorm how can we turn it into a different exercise so it could serve us emotionally, maybe interpretively, performance-wise, technically, all those elements. And it's really kind of a creative process, right? There is no one book you could follow, but you could really be creative about it and also just maybe be in conversation with the conductor, with instructors, or maybe with different people within your ensemble to understand their needs.
Mm-hmm.
Laura's asking, do you think you can sometime over practice and lose the spontaneity and vibrancy in a performance? I sometimes find I'm trying to remember exactly how to sing something the same each time and wonder if I lose some of the freshness and honesty of a song. Oh, that you're pointing to so many different important topics right now. I'm very glad you brought this up. So in terms of over practicing, I think that needs to be defined. I'm not sure what you exactly mean by that. If over practicing means losing freshness and honesty of a song, that's totally a thing. Every time you practice in a practice room, you kind of need to first get into a specific mindset, just like I discussed in my first webinar. First is the mindset before you even sing a note. That mindset needs to be whatever is going to empower you. So that mindset could be that I'm going to imagine I'm the character in this song, and these words are coming out of my mouth for the first time ever. So sometimes we need a reminder. We sing through some very dramatic piece of music, and it feels like we're just saying, oh, I woke up and I had a toast. That's not what it is, right? We need to bring the drama every time, and for that, we need the freshness. I like that you use the word freshness. Sometimes you might need to put a piece of music aside for a few weeks. Let that settle in your brain, think about it, maybe hum a little bit, and then come back to it to have a chance to rediscover it. Sometimes when you've sung pieces a whole bunch of times over years, I love the idea of relearning pieces that we thought we knew and rediscover them in new, exciting ways. And I really like that as well. When we sing, so every time you sing something or every time you analyze something, it's a great idea to acknowledge every time it's going to be different. We, as humans, we almost cannot ever replicate things exactly, right? So every time there's a little bit of a different nuance. Through our practice, we try to have control over some elements, like support. I want to always have good support. I want to make sure I breathe well. Those are elements we want to keep the same, but every performance is different. So going into a performance, just accepting that this is a new experience. Every time it's a new experience. We're not trying to recreate things exactly the same. We're trying to create the same thing multiple times in new, exciting ways. So not only the audience has fun, you have fun too. Especially if it's the type of repertoire you sing a lot, you should have fun, right? So think of it even as a new song every time you sing. What's the worst that could happen? You can find new things, right? Rob is saying it might also work to remind yourself of the significance of the song, why you want to sing it. Yes, connect with it emotionally. What's in it that's important to you? What's in it that's enjoyable for you? Is there an important message that maybe other singers interpretively weren't thinking about, but you want to somehow bring it to the audience's attention? That's so helpful. Thank you. I will check out your videos that I missed on YouTube. You're welcome, Laura. And Ella has her hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So I put my comment above. Just, I think it got lost. So many. It's a really excellent
Sorry
presentation.
about that.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Thank you. It's excellent. I really appreciate it. Yeah. How would I learn how to convey emotions in a song?
That's a good question. So through music learning, I always tell my friends that music school, for me, wasn't just about learning music, learning technique, learning ensemble work. It was really a journey for me to learn how to connect emotionally to myself, to my thoughts. That's a practice of emotional connectivity every time you sing a song. It's a new thing. It's not some people can access that easier than others, of course, but it's always it's not just a singing exercise. It's kind of like if you've done mindfulness and meditation, every time it's a practice of actively bringing ourselves to a headspace where we could kind of connect emotionally to whatever it is. So oftentimes I would say think about things that might be relatable in a song to you or your story. That relatability element is really good. And of course, you don't need to share your stories with anybody. You just want to put a little bit of you in the song. You don't need to say it to anybody, but the fact that you relate to it, when you sing the song, it will come across as authentic because it will feel like you mean what you're saying. It's not just a bunch of random text, random words that you were given, right? It will feel like honest to you. A lot of times you need to, again, spend time a lot with the text. Just think, look at the poem, see how it inspires you. What are the things that maybe, I don't know, it kind of holds a grip to your heart? Is there a part that you enjoy? Sometimes for really dramatic music that I don't find any relatability in our everyday life, I like it because I'm like, what if for those 10 seconds that I'm singing that aria, I am that character? I could live for 10 minutes as that character. So it's a chance for me to experience a life that is completely different, completely different than my personal life. And sometimes I find that quite fun actually. So it's the opposite of relatability because I don't relate to it at all, that I kind of want to experience what goes on in that character's head. And it's really nice if you could have group sessions, whether on Zoom or in person, where you could brainstorm about elements of the story. So really just what is the story about? And through that exploration of the story, you come to construct a character that will feel like a real human being to you, with real struggles and emotions and failures and dreams, you know? And it's a lot of also willingness and openness to go there, because opening ourselves up emotionally, sometimes it could be hurtful, right? It could bring some stuff that maybe aren't pleasant for us. So it's also a very personal choice of you deciding how far you want to go into just emotional exploration of every song, and how much of it is too much, how much of it is a little. I hope that answered your question. I'm not sure if it did.
Yeah, I'm just struggling with it because I'm not an experienced singer, but so is it sort of like method acting, like where you actually feel the emotions and that automatically conveys itself in your singing of the song, or
Sometimes it is, yes. Sometimes it will feel like you're really that character. You're really just living as them for those minutes. But other times, or I would say most often, singers feel like we're a vessel through which things are being translated to the audience. So if we're angry, we're not going to kind of put a lot of pressure on ourselves and on our psyche to actually be angry when we have to act angry on stage. So a lot of times it's a balance of knowing we're acting, going there, but not actually putting psychological pressure on ourselves or something that is hurtful to us. We always want it to be very empowering to us, right? Not hurtful. And it's those boundaries that you negotiate also with yourself. A lot of times, maybe it would be a good start if you think you're just a mirror and messages, ideas, characters are just being translated through you. You're the voice for those characters who are voiceless, maybe, or for fictional characters who were never heard, you know? I find those ideas really interesting. I love reading poetry, and I wrote my thesis on romantic music and Victorian literature. So if you think you find joy in that kind of a thing, just read more poetry, read more fiction, and see how you could think of those characters of songs just like a novel, with fully developed stories and emotions. I hope that helps. You're welcome. Patricia.
Quick question. Uh, if could it not be a little bit chaotic if everyone in the choir does that, but the conductor has an emotion that they want?
That's a very good question. Thanks so much for that again. So, in a choir setting or an orchestral setting, sometimes the conductor is seen as the captain of the ship, right? So they're the driver, kind of. They set the direction for a lot of things, which is fair. We respect that position. We negotiate those boundaries. But for me personally, so I always, when I work with choirs, I give them some idea or the way I think makes the most sense. But to me, the most meaningful ensemble work is where everybody's perspectives is taken into account, not just mine, not just the conductor. That's one person, right? And a conductor is nobody without the voices. They can move their hands as much as they want. The voices aren't there. So it's very important that that respect is reciprocated between both parties, and that creative energy used instead of tension, that's creative energy for discussion. So I never, so first of all, if everybody brings a little piece of themselves into their singing for choir, it's not going to seem chaotic. It's going to rather seem authentic. It's going to seem that every singer wants to say something and the song means something to them. And I want to see that from choristers, and I want the audience to feel that. That's why I always encourage individual reflection. You don't need to tell me what exactly you think, and sometimes actually ideas might be in not totally, they might not agree with each other, they might be in disagreement, but I don't find that a bad thing. I find that's a really cool creative thing you can work with, you know? While again, this idea of inclusion, including everybody's opinions, they're there not just to sing, but to feel valued and to think that their perspectives are taken into consideration. And that also, artwork is all, it's so, it hits you in the heart, right? It's artwork. You're not just doing it just because, but you want to express something with it, right? And I think there needs to be space for that expression of every individual person. I hope that answered you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think I saw another hand, but I don't remember where. Was there another question or comment? If there are questions that come to your mind afterwards, still feel free to message me, okay? I'm going to put my email again. I'm going to also give you my YouTube. So if you go to my website, it's at the bottom of the page with all the other social media things. So that's the YouTube. I also wanted to mention that the next webinar is 2 weeks from now. That's going to be about storytelling and textual understanding in particular, to kind of build on this webinar. So if you're interested in that, feel free to register for that one as well. And there's going to be one webinar every month until August. So I'm going to also post the webinar link in the chat. You will also receive an email from me after this, but if you don't, sometimes it doesn't always work well, feel free to reach out to me.
All right.
Perfect. So if there are no more questions, we can conclude here, but thanks so much for joining me, and I hope to see you in future webinars.